Frankie,
Ian!
we are talking about leaving a company today. And for everyone listening out there, this is actually a therapy session for Frank because we are 12 episodes in and he's already thinking of quitting as my co-host for this show. So this is really just me talking to Frank about all the reasons in his head of why he's still doing this.
In all seriousness, Ian dressed for this occasion. He dressed like a lumberjack because lumberjacks quit and get fired all the time. So he's dressed appropriately.
This is what I would rather be doing. I'd rather be out splitting logs right now than talking about this with you. So
there's no doubt that, like, when I think of Ian's strengths, like log splitting is near the top.
It's right near the top. Anything with manual labor is what you think about for Ian Mathews most of the time. The calluses on my hand would show you that.
No doubt. I mean, nothing goes with calluses and manual labor like manicures.
Yes, no doubt. That I do have some calluses, but that's from swinging a baseball bat in practice. That's about my only calluses.
The only calluses I have are now long since gone. It used to be when I used to work out. They're just memories.
So we are recording this just before the end of the year, and it is timely. I read something. HR magazine had some survey that came out, and 1 in 5 people leave their company in January. And I think that's worth repeating. 20% of people leave their company in January. So this falls in line with resolutions, with goals. It's a transition. It's a mental date in someone's mind. Frank, I think a lot of that's got to do with probably end of year bonuses, wrapping a year up, maybe just not having the energy to leave a company around the holidays, because you want to just get through the holidays. Then you're going to go deal with whatever offer letter you have. I think there's a lot of just natural inertia around it. But
yeah, business planning starts and like you get your new plan in January and you're looking at it and you're like, the last thing I want to do is dedicate another year of my life chasing these freaking goals. And that usually starts in January.
When did you leave NVR?
I quit in January.
Quit in January. My last day with NVR was December 31st. So January was my first free man month. I left GE in January. I started at NVR on February 14th, 2 weeks after leaving GE. So we've left 3 companies together, big ones, and we've done it all in January.
Did you ever see the movie 90s or 2000s movie, I guess, Wedding Crashers?
Oh, yeah.
There's a scene and he's like, it's wedding season. It isn't wedding season. It's quitting season. This is when people do it.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's, and I think it's interesting. Part of what got us talking about why we even do this agenda, probably the last 60 days, I feel like I've had an unusually large number of people that I know reach out to me and talk to me about thinking about leaving their company. And really trying to hash through what they were thinking of doing. Some had other offers. Some did not have other offers, just wanted to leave. They were unhappy for different reasons. So I very much felt like that January thing is creeping up just from the volume of calls I'm taking, on people that are considering leaving. And Frank, it's really never the same answer you give someone when they ask for your advice on something like that. Sometimes you listen to them and you think, you should stay where you're at because you're in a bad place to be making a decision. And sometimes you think about it and you're like, based on everything you just told me, there's zero reason you should spend another month there. And sometimes it's the same company that you're talking to people about.
I think you and I have had this conversation for years. We marvel at the fact of how little time people really put into where they're going to buy a house. And we put and we also have marveled at how little thought in many instances goes into career decisions, where you live, where you work, when you quit, when you start something new, are you being strategic? Like you have all these skills and then you forget to use them on yourself. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's December, January, if you're like staring down the barrel of the end of a year and you start thinking about these things, but it tends to line up end of the year, beginning of the next. And one of the things that I think is, as we get older and we get into executive level positions, and for our listeners as well, there's often bonuses, significant amounts of money tied to finishing a calendar year somewhere. So, I mean, that was something that personally affected you. It's something that very much affected my decision leaving in January. Like I need to lock in my year end. So, because I got a huge bonus that was paid out. I mean, I was no longer a member of the company when the bonus came in, but I still got my bonus because I'd earned it. So you got to think about those things. You don't want to leave, like you don't want to just scorch earth. You want to be smart and set yourself up going into something else.
I think there's some loyalty also involved in it, Frank. Certainly, December is typically the largest month of the year for a salesperson, and they have, little kickers that kick in, but you usually want to get that December commission check because usually January there's no money. So that's another thing. Usually January there's nothing left. So there's no pay to even keep you around. You're right. In both situations, I had stock options to think about. So my equity came due if I stuck around till the 31st of the year, if I was there. So in both cases, that was important to me. So financially, I think a lot of people are staying till the end of the year and thinking of leaving. And I think this number is going to be even a little higher in a year like 2021, where you're coming off of a year that was flat out bad for half of companies. It was really good for some companies. It was a boon. But for some companies, it was just flat out bad. And a lot of people, out of a feeling of loyalty, stuck around with their company this year, but they might have seen some things they didn't like. They might have seen some short-term decisions from their company, people laying off a little too much, getting rid of some people that have been around a long time. Then all of a sudden the market rebounds and, now they're back out talking to some of those people. So I think a lot of employees were watching how managers behaved during the pandemic and didn't like what they saw. And so they kind of stuck around through the end of the year, but their loyalty isn't the same as it was coming into 2020.
And I think, right. And I think 2020, there was a major kind of contraction. The contraction is more or less over. And in certain industries, it is not. Like in restaurant industries, there's most likely contraction again because we're getting into winter and you're not going to be able to have outdoor patio seating and stuff like that. But in other industries, like we kind of know where the bottom is, and there's people are organizing and growing. I mean, we've grown, we've doubled in size. I mean, since we did a big reduction in COVID. So that being the case, I think I think the market is frothy. And I think this is a timely topic for us to get into, because if you're not happy in your job, you spend more time at work, and I can look up the statistic, but by and large, you spend like 4 to 5 times more time with your work family than you do your nuclear family. Like you see your wife and your kids less than you do see people in the office when you're going to an office. So like it's a really big decision, and now is a good time to reset if you haven't already done, already made plans to do so.
I like it more when you just spit statistics out off the cuff, because then in editing, I can go tell you how wrong you were after the fact. So keep doing what you're doing and don't look up stats and just spit things out like you're serious about it.
You're thwarting my enthusiasm with these statistics. Like now I used to overshoot, then he'd give me a hard time, and now I undershoot. He's like 5%, come on. And I'm like, well, I said 1%, that was too high.
So
that's a true story.
Yes. And it's also, Frank, you can get into unemployment numbers, you can get into the job market, all that. The truth is, good companies are always looking to upgrade talent. They're always looking for better talent. And the people who leave you in a company, typically, in my experience, it wasn't the person I wanted to leave who left.
Right.
If that makes sense, right? It wasn't the person that I was interested in firing anyway because they weren't a good performer or they were a bad attitude. It was always my good performer with a good attitude who left when I didn't have enough people. Yeah. And for companies, that's the person you need to be paying attention to. The mentality of where are they going to go? It's a tough market. It's a pandemic. That's ignorant, because good companies are like yours are looking for good talent. And if you don't treat people well, just because it's a pandemic, what you end up losing is your top 20%.
So let's say this. More options. Let's say this real quick. We contemplated like what to do with this episode. One of the things we had talked about was how to get hired now. And I think there's a perception out there that you can't get a job now. And that's absolutely untrue. You can absolutely find a job now. And not only can you find a job, good companies are hiring. And I'm a small company, but we got 30 plus employees. we don't always release these episodes in order. So like there's an up and a down, but we've had from COVID to now, we've had a steady growth of people, and we're over 30. We offer health insurance. We offer 401k. Like we offer a very competitive wage. And why is all this relevant? We are finding incredibly talented people that worked at bad companies who have left, and we've been able to find them, and we've been able to find them in a way that's way easier than in the past. The other thing is, if you're on the fence of should I quit or should I not, like the time is right, but should I really do this? This is very relevant. You might not get the exact number you want. We don't offer as high of a base as we did 6 to 12 months ago. But if you get inside the door, the incentive is there. The performance, the ability to perform is there. We have people who got in the door on a lower wage that have quickly gotten raises. People who have had promotions, moved to different roles. Like that's real. Like getting like, so don't let the noise that's happening out there talk you out of quitting because you're worried about the market, or even if you don't get the exact offer. Say, you know, what does 6 months look like? What does a year look like? What does 2 years down the road look like at this company? And can I do those things if I perform? And have a little bit of self-belief that you could do it, because right now is a growth time with the right company.
Yeah, there's plenty of reasons to go to work for Cava companies. You know, we're going to talk in this episode, we're going to talk about the top 10 kind of things that you might be thinking about leaving. You know, is it the right time for me to leave? And these are some things that I'm going through. What's not listed on here is the number one reason that Cava companies people pick on, which is the owner keeps eating my lunch out of the refrigerator. That's not on the list. We're not going to go into that today, Frank, but that might be part of the bonus features that we go in afterward.
IJ, do you hear the abuse?
So number one on our list of top 10 is your company doesn't treat people well. And I have a story from this, that my first job out of college was with GE, and I was like a typical college kid. I was gung-ho all about GE. I wore it on my sleeve. I wore GE polo shirts all over the place and jackets. I was just proud of working for, you know, a big company, and proud that I had that job.
And in all honesty, with your GPA, you should have been proud.
I should have been proud I got into there. There's no doubt about it. Had to round it up to a 3, and that didn't really belong on that resume. So the about 4 years into working there, I sold services, industrial products, things of that nature. And we sold field engineers. So our engineers were the product a lot of times. They would go out and they would fix some steel mill's process. And so our account managers, which was my job, we were very close with our field engineers. We got to know them well. We talked about customers. We strategized. We got each other's back. They would cover for me. If I needed it, I would cover for them. And they counted on me to get them business, to go keep them their hourly rate going. And we had, 30 of them in our Chicago office. And one of my favorites was a guy, he was probably like 60. He'd been with the company 30 some years. And I remember he got an opportunity with a smaller company, and it was for a lot more money. And he turned it down, and they ended up filling the position. And 9 months later, GE laid him off. And I just remember thinking, here was someone that made a decision based on loyalty to a company, and the company didn't have the same loyalty back. And now I'm not even second guessing the question of why it was Al, why it was anything else. But the lesson to me was just loyalty. The concept of loyalty is silly. Whether you're an employee or not, you're really just a freelance contractor who's paid to do something for an organization that makes profit. That's it. It doesn't matter whether you have a 401k or you work for the company. You are a freelancer that, as long as you produce, you are paid. And having this concept in your mind of, I'm going to be loyal to an organization until the very end, I can just assure you, your company will not give you the same benefit of the doubt. And unless you work for just a tiny company that can't stand the fact of thinking about letting someone go, companies do not have the same loyalty that people have for them.
So smaller, I'm a consultant with a bunch of small businesses, as you know. what happens in a lot of instances is small businesses do have loyalty, because they don't want to go through the pain of hiring because they don't know how to hire. That's real. So if you work at a small place, you probably will get a lot more leeway and leverage. You'll get a lot more leash than you're going to get at GE. GE was famous. Even when your team was great, and you and I have talked about this, they would fire 10 or 20% of their people. So you got to know where you are. But I think there's a couple things to unpack. Ian and I both live in Virginia, even though we live miles apart, but nearly every state in the US works this way. Your employment contract is at will. At will means you can quit and you can get fired. And there's unwritten rules around business. In the old days, there used to be a lot of loyalty. Like if you go back and read business books that talk a lot about nostalgia from the 40s and 50s and 60s, like you would retire with the gold watch. Those days are over. Technology has come in, like there's many different things, and iteration happens so much faster in business. And many times iteration will happen. It didn't used to happen within a career. So you could be the same person, get the gold watch. That's not the way it works. So you have to understand that. I watched one of our senior level managers go through the same thing at NVR. So it was 2000 and the market really kind of softened in 5, but it was like 6 and 7, 2006, 2007. And I watched someone who was, when I started, he was like 9 rungs ahead of me, but he was like my boss's boss's boss. He was, he was a regional manager, and there was very few of those people at NVR. And I remember, like, I didn't know the backstory. I didn't know all the stuff between him and the CEO. But what I learned was, like, he didn't have the same vision that the CEO had. The CEO won. And we were like, how could they do this to a guy that's been here for 30 years? He's come up through the ranks. He was replaced. Like, he got a nice stock package and he was exited, but that was it. And he was replaced by someone who would listen to management. So you really kind of, like, to me, I was like, I was in my low 30s. I had years to go. And I was like, there is absolutely no way in hell that it was the first time, it was some of the first times I started to realize this place may not be good to me long-term. I have to kind of look out for myself. And I think people miss that.
Yeah, I'll give one more story from GE on this whole company doesn't treat people well. So I had 2 really great mentors at GE that just, I had a lot of good managers, good mentors there, but I had 2 that I'd been with a while, my boss and my boss's boss for a while when I was a manager. And we went through a reorganization. So all of the management changed above them, and they were like that out, just summarily dismissed. And these were incredible. They're both CEOs today for smaller businesses somewhere else. These were really good managers.
Right.
Taught me, like, cared about people. They were the anti of what GE would become.
Right.
And and what was wild was the new regime came in. They wanted the old out, and they interviewed me, and they liked me. And since they chose me, I was popular with them. So they liked me. They promoted me, put me in. But I just saw what happened to 2 really, in my mind, better, more experienced leaders were just dismissed because there was a change of regime. So what that told me was I was one regime change away from being flicked out the door at GE. And it didn't matter how, like, I benefited from this regime change. I got a huge promotion. I took the top level guys, my mentor's job, but I just knew it's a matter of time before this company reorgs again and I'm out. Like, I don't want to, and at the time I didn't have kids. So I'm like, do I want to have kids and worrying about this kind of crap one day working for a company that is this quick to just get rid of people?
One of the things I think is so important that you just said is, I think it's incredibly important that you know where you work. And at GE during that stretch of time, that's how things were. NVR kind of morphed into that. So where I started to work and where I worked changed because the market changed. But in addition to that, like, I was getting in an Uber in Miami, and my wife and I got in the Uber and we're driving, and the woman's explaining to us how loyal she is to Uber, and she refuses to drive for anybody else. And, like, the whole thing I'm thinking is, Uber's set up so you're not loyal to them. Like, why be loyal to Uber? They don't want you to be loyal. They want you to be a free agent. They want you to come and go. So you have to be very mindful of where you work. Like the recipe that you used in the past, it may not be the right recipe. So know where you're at, understand those things, and don't get amnesia. Like you didn't have, like you just watched two of your buddies who you're still friends with that I know get ushered out and you got a huge raise. That's awesome. But at the same time, don't say, well, this can't happen to me, because as soon as you think that, it's going to.
It will happen to you. Like that, if that's the culture within your organization, it will happen to you. So if you're looking around you and other people are being treated poorly, you just can't assume that you will be treated differently. A culture of a company is a culture. And if that is something that is prevalent and that's a reason why you don't feel comfortable staying, I would say that that is a very legitimate reason for being open-minded. Now, that's not a reason for running out the door. You have to be rational, do the right things. But I think it is very much a gut check for you that your being overly loyal is misguided.
Well, and if you're looking to jump ship, and if you can figure out how to talk to somebody who works there, see how people are treated. Ask the question. Like I encourage people who are employed here, or people who are coming to potentially be employed here to communicate. And one of the things that I get feedback on after people join the company is, oh, I talked to Vince. He was so nice. He was polite. He said people get treated well. Like that really matters. So like sleuth that stuff out, but realize if you're in a place where the hammer can fly, it can fly towards your head.
Yeah. I think out of this top 10 list that we're building, for me, in each case when I left, there were multiple checkoffs.
Yeah.
There were multiple checkoffs that it wasn't one thing in any of the cases. It was multiple pieces on here. And I think for me, it wasn't this way at General Electric because I was not miserable. But this is a lot of people that I talk to just say, look, I'm miserable. I just don't like what I'm doing. I don't like the culture. I'm dragging myself out of bed. I can't wait till Friday. I can tell you, Frank, in 20 years of working at GE and MBR, in only maybe 2 months out of that whole 20 years, was I coming into the office on Tuesday and thinking about Friday. And that was at the very end where I was just like, when is Friday? And that hadn't happened to me since summer jobs working construction in high school. That had not happened to me. And I was like, how have I got to a place where I'm thinking about Friday on Monday? All prior to that, you come in on Monday, blink your eyes, and it's Thursday. You're not even thinking about it. It's just my weeks flew by because I loved what I was doing. I was having fun. And then it just got to a place where I could not wait until Friday. I was living for the weekend. And what I can say is that didn't last long. When I got to a place where I was living for the weekend, my mind was like, I'm doing something different. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life doing this.
So you never got to a point of misery, and I did. So you're kind of talking about Mondays and Fridays and stuff like that. Like I get it, but my job changed pretty drastically when I moved, and I got a huge paycheck to move. Like I got a relocation bonus, and I was trapped. I couldn't leave, and it was over 6 figures. It was a significant amount of money. So if I left, I would have had to pay it back. So like I couldn't leave, and I was off. It was awful. Like I hated it, and it was it was up to 2 years I had to pay it back, and it just didn't take long for me to be pretty miserable. So I just grinded it out because on the other end, I had something that was a huge payoff. And ultimately it's part of the thing that I used to build my business and start with. It was a significant amount of cash. So sometimes if you're miserable, you got to grind it out. Being in a difficult job, having tough tasks, Ian and I don't think those things are miserable. Those are usually challenges that we really enjoyed. Like, coming in and taking over a bad community in sales, taking over a segment of business that wasn't working. We found those to be challenges, not miserable things. But when you transition to misery and you're looking forward to the weekend, you're thinking about it. Here's another tip. If you're an employee, don't start talking about the weekend in front of your bosses. Like when you start saying, oh, 2 more days to Friday, like on a team call, like I make a note of that. And I'm like, oh, that person's probably not gonna be around much longer, because not only are you thinking about it, now you're getting everybody else to start thinking about it. So it's not great for culture, but sometimes you got to grind stuff out. But if you're miserable, that's the beauty. You don't have to stay. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here is you don't have to stay.
Yeah. And I think, I certainly that's not the only 2 months when I've been miserable at work. I think another question you have to ask yourself, if you're miserable today, is there a unique reason for it?
Right.
You know, our friend that runs restaurants, he had a miserable March and April. My God, he had a miserable March and April. Does that mean he doesn't want to do what he's doing anymore? No. He knew it was short term. He's got to grind through it. It was a very tough period. Really, it was probably a miserable 4 months, 5 months he had to deal with it. But in his head, he knew this is short. This is short term. We got to get through this as a team. We got to do some things that really suck. We're going to be arguing and fighting over certain things with our investors and our firm that we work with. But he knew he was going to get through it, and he was going to work through it. So you got to ask yourself, is there a good reason that I am miserable right now? Working in home building, new regulations would hit for mortgages, for financing, for underwriting, where it would impact both you and I, Frank, where it was like, God, this sucks. All we're doing is talking about whether someone qualifies right now. But you could always tell yourself, okay, this is short term.
Is it systemic misery, or is it just something that's it's situationally based?
Yeah. Or I think I really like the way you say that. The question to really ask yourself is, so in all the other times where it was miserable, everyone in our corporate office knew it was miserable, knew there were problems, and were willing to try to solve it, to invest in it, to put resources behind it, to add more people. A lot of times my misery was just based on, I don't have enough managers, I don't have people.
Yeah.
And if you've got a CEO saying, hire, go, hey, how can I give you resources? What can I do? That's not misery to me. That's just a tough.
That's just business. Like business is never easy. That's not misery.
That's business.
Like thinking like I'd rather drink Crisco oil than go to work is misery. Like, yeah, I'd rather jump off this bridge.
Misery is if we were all dealing with that and everyone in your corporate office was like, tough. That's just the way we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
We're not listening to you. Like we don't want to change it. This is how it's just going to be.
So let's unpack this a little bit differently, right? So Sarbanes-Oxley comes through, and it's 15, 20 years ago at this point, but let's talk about it anyways on the periphery. It changes the business that you're in. So it's miserable. Like you got to put in a bunch of regulations. You got to think about how mortgages happen, but changing from NVR to DR Horton isn't going to solve your problems. So misery is going to follow you to that other job. Now, if you're so miserable you can't live with it, well, maybe you change industries that aren't affected by this legislation. But so that's what we're kind of saying. The other thing is, if you're in the right product space, as an employer, I look for people who are talented that workplaces where I'm not necessarily loyal to them. Like they're not like a vendor that I love, but I know their bosses are pricks. I know the conditions suck. I know they're not paid very well. Like I look for talented people who I know are in the rule of misery because I can easily attract them. So you have to think about those things. Like if you've got a skill set and there's an employer in your marketplace who values that differently, that could help. I mean, it could be a 5 to 20% raise in a better environment with people who support you. And the job didn't really change, but it changes. Am I miserable or am I not?
Sure. And I think number 3 falls into the same. I think 3 and 4 that we're going to talk about are comparable to miserable, but they're offshoots. So number 3 for me is I'm bored, or, another way of saying it is I'm not growing. And to me, and I think you're wired a lot like I am, when I've been bored at work, I've been miserable. So they kind of go hand in hand. I'm not good with being bored and being disinterested and not feeling challenged. And those are things that are incredibly important to me, that I kind of have a nagging sensation in the back of my head that I'm wasting years, I'm wasting months, I'm wasting days,
right,
where I could be growing. I
Right.
could be producing more. I could
Yeah.
be making bigger changes. And here I am just going through the motions. It's something I already know I've kind of conquered this, and here I am still doing it.
So in my career, I was with NVR for, just at 12 years all in. And I got promoted a bunch. So like the longest tenure I was ever in a job was a little over 2 years. It's like 2.5 years was the most. So it's really hard to get bored if you're into something for 2.5 years. I mean,
Almost all lateral promotions too, right, Frank?
correct. Yes, we've covered this. So how many, how long were you in mortgages? Like over a decade?
13 years I was at MVR, but similar to you, I was always, I never went 2 years without someone giving me another office, a new market. So
But
there
it
was
was,
always some new challenge.
but it was correct. But a lot of it was like I went from project management to sales to estimating to managing sales to managing construction to managing like running a division. I had that role for about 4 years, but you had that role for about 10. So boredom comes in there. Like that's real. So
Yeah, it was a little different because my entry level job was GE. I came into
right,
NVR as a vice president.
right.
So to me, it was just I kept doing the same thing over and over again. It just was bigger, bigger,
So
bigger, 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 bigger.
I think the reason I'm getting into this is for this reason. Like if everything doesn't align, boredom, like you might be miserable now, but boredom's going to come too. Like I never had a chance to get bored, just like you didn't have a chance to get bored in the first 8 years at NVR because things were changing. But the last 4 years at NVR, it was more the same. Your region went from 600 to 800 people. Nothing really changed. Your geographic scope or where you had to fly to changed. So boredom will come. But if boredom does come, what Ian and I are saying over and over again, if you get bored, ask why. That may not be a reason to quit. It might be just, I need a little bit more responsibility. I want something else. That might be a conversation that you go have with your superiors and you say, I'm a bit bored. Is there something else I could do? It might lead to promotion. So, but if it gets to a point where it's untenable, like Ian's boredom was, I'm bored. I don't want to iterate. I want out. Like there's those different things.
Yeah, and I think where I knew is my last promotion. I went from running a region that was, let's say, half the size of the company to a position that was a senior vice president role, managing all the regions. And I got a promotion, and it was equally boring to me as being a regional. Nothing changed. It was like, okay, I'm just paid a hell of a lot more, but I'm still doing the same things. And it it was just to a point where I was like, is this what I'm gonna do? Home building and mortgages for another 20 years of my life, working for the sake. I couldn't, if I didn't want to do it 20 more years, why did I want to do it one more year? That's kind of where I was. I didn't even want to be in the industry. It just bored me. We're going to build more houses and capture more. I just didn't care. And I remember the spark that just set it off was doing the last plan that I did. I remember the first plan that I did, annual plan. It was so exciting. All these new metrics, all the little profit center levers that I could pull, all the plans that I could put together and go out and implement. And then doing the last one, I'm like, who gives a shit? All right, 5%. What do you want? 4%, 6%? Okay, 6% more house. You want another 2 basis points of revenue? Oh yeah, man, we'll get it. Man. Oh, that's sexy. And I just remember being incredibly bored with the whole. I just couldn't care less when I went through it, and I'm sure my boss felt that. I went through the motions. I wasn't fighting or arguing anything. It was like, whatever, give me whatever plan you want.
Yeah, I want to say this again. Your career is important. It's one of the most time-consuming events of your life. If you're miserable, you're bored, iterate or get out. That's it. Let's get into bad bosses.
Number 4, your boss sucks. By far, the number one reason people leave companies is their manager.
Yeah.
Frank, you want to venture to guess on a statistic that I could tell you is wrong later?
No, I can tell you that the top 4 reasons people quit are boss, job fit, stunted growth, pay is fourth.
Look at you just dropping it in there. That is big time. Where did you get that from? Where did you Google search that bad boy?
It's unsourced.
Unsourced, beautiful. So your boss sucks. So if your boss sucks, the lazy advice is leave. That's lazy advice. Right. And I think it's the wrong advice, because I can tell you I've had 20 bosses in my life and 2 companies. And out of 20 bosses, maybe 10 weren't that good. And I didn't leave every time they weren't a perfect boss, a great boss, because bosses change, managers change, and sometimes they change very quickly.
Yep.
And as someone who promoted a lot of people into management jobs and hired outside managers on a regular basis, over 100, just in the last 5-6 years alone, I got it wrong a lot. And that wasn't a good reason for everyone under that boss to just immediately quit. Because when I got it wrong, I would try to go address it quickly. I would either help them become a better boss, one that didn't suck, or I would replace them with a boss who was good. And to leave the company just because all of a sudden you're saddled with a bad boss who isn't doing a good job, that's a terrible reason to just leave. And especially if you believe in the management staff above that manager, if you believe in the owner of your small business, the executives in the company, you have to trust, and you look around the company and there's good managers everywhere, and you just happen to get the short straw. Well, if the culture is such that they put good managers in place, that manager won't last long doing that. And you can normally just outlast a bad manager.
So I'm going to summarize it this way. If your boss sucks and the company sucks, it's probably time to quit. If your boss sucks, but you love the company, it's probably not time to quit. The other thing you can look at with a shitty boss, I cursed, with a bad boss is this. Good managers are going to see that you have a bad boss. If you're able to produce with a bad boss in a company that's great, you're going to get recognized. You're probably going to get promoted. If you can figure out how to coexist with that person, if you can champion this person, if you become the reason that the person who is a bad boss becomes tolerable to a good boss, that is where exponential growth happens. And now at a bad company, it's going to get missed. At a great company, it doesn't. They're like, wow, did you see what he was able to do there?
Look at the influence that person had over their manager. And I've had situations like that where
you lead from the bottom up.
I liked my company and I've worked really hard to help my manager see things that he was missing.
Yep.
And that he wasn't paying attention to, bringing him out, sharing things in the field, trying to help him be a better boss, that because he wasn't getting the results and I knew he was frustrated. So is he open? Is he open to becoming a better manager? Is he open to getting better, to improving, to listening? Because if that's the case, then help them be a better manager, help them grow, because look, you weren't always perfect at everything you did too. Now, if you look around and all the managers are just like that manager and the executives of your company don't quite care either, well, your manager is probably not going to change much. And the world you're living in is the wrong world. It's not going to change. You're probably going to be in the same place.
So if you have a bad boss who's just a bad boss, they're inexperienced, they're not good at it, they're in the wrong role, they're over their they're over their skis. Those things can all be kind of overcome. But if you have a bad boss and it's because the boss is threatened or insecure, and you and I have really never talked about this, but I threaten people. Like, I know I did. Like, I was better at it than they were. I understood it more fundamentally. Like, I got in there and 9 months later, like, I was a pro at a job that usually took people a lot longer to master. So if you're in a bad environment, you're going to get stuck there and you're going to be there for a while. But if you're in a good environment, what ends up happening is that bad manager, that person who's trying to block you, your superiors see that and they're like, hold on a minute. Frank has been great in every other role. There's probably something here. And then you get moved and then you get to be you again. So there's a bunch of ways around that. Now, we're not going to really get into the politics of all of this, but there's also politics of it. Like if you have one person above you, if you're in a good corporate structure and you're one person above you stinks, there's probably somebody else you can talk to and just say, I'm not jiving with this person. Like, if you were me, how would you handle this? And you start to position a little bit. You're not bitching. You're not becoming someone who is, malcontent, but at the same time, you're leaving little clues. And those are, at a good company, those things get picked up and you can get redirected as well.
I think that's a good way of saying it. And I think number 5 goes in a little bit of line of exactly what we were just saying. So you're not interested in any jobs in the company. So it's one thing to say, I'm just done with my job. I don't like my job. Frank said he was in sales, then he was in construction. He got to move around a little bit. He was in some costing. If you look around and you see every position in the company, I don't want any of those jobs. I don't want to do anything anyone around me is doing. And I don't even want my manager's job. I don't want to get promoted. That his job looks terrible. I want to pass. I think that's an important piece to this whole thing, is if something we just said above that, and then you don't like other jobs, because that's one thing you can do. If you're not happy in your role, if you don't like what you're doing, if you find you're just not a natural salesperson, but you love analytics, and are there other jobs that you could do that are totally different within your organization? Because everywhere I worked, there were, we all had the same company logo, but man, there were some very different jobs than mine, all of them. They were so different. And if you love your company, you love the culture, and it's a good company, it's growing, it's strong, it's stable, there's a good chance you'll do well in a different position. You just might be doing the wrong thing. And a lot of people leave without asking that question.
Yep.
And really not once, but asking a lot of people that question to see, what would it take for me to get into that role?
I think it depends on where you work. Like here at my company with 30 employees, there's not too many areas that you don't know about. So there are different skills. There's property management, there's construction, there's sales, but it's not GE with thousands of employees and thousands of different opportunities or business verticals. I was very fortunate that the companies that I knew that I wasn't interested in any of the jobs were companies that I said no to. Coming out of college, I had an opportunity to work at 13 companies that I said no to. And I remember like being in one company on a Saturday night around 6 p.m. and the Saturday at 6, and half the office was full. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why would I go to work there? Like, if I want to get ahead of these people, I got to work Sundays. Like, I that's not a place I want to be. I don't care what position it is. I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And there was another group of people who were all dressed like mafiosos. Like, if I was in middle school, I probably would have been fired up about this. But coming out of college, I looked at it and I was like, you guys all dress really nice. Like, yeah, we're really nice. We're cutthroat, man. Like I remember him kind of saying that to me, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to be there either. So like sometimes you can sniff that stuff out early, but if you can't, go.
You could have busted out your Z Cavarici suit though, olive.
Oh, dude, that thing was sick.
3-piece with some vest pinstripes.
This is something I refuse to participate in. Like, people now are rolling up their pant bottoms again. I'm like, I've done that. I'm not doing that again.
Oh, tight roll. You got to tight roll it too. You got to really keep it tight.
I've done that. The Z Cavaricis in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm done. Like,
what about bringing back like those belts that you could like it hung down from the side with the
like the little turn, like you had the whole style and it would turn down?
I totally had that going on.
Nope, done.
Nope, not bringing that back either.
I'm over it.
Okay, but you could bring back flannels if you want to go lumberjack like me. It's coming back, Frank.
When you're done with that shirt, let me know. I'll wear it to get my Christmas tree every year. I have one flannel. It's Christmas tree flannel.
That was good. That was a good one. Normally your jokes suck. That was pretty good. So number 6, people are leaving all around you. So
I'm not leaving this podcast, but leaving company.
People are dropping out this podcast because of your jokes. So people are leaving all around you. So your company has a turnover problem.
Yep.
And you might not be terribly miserable. Maybe you're feeling a little bit of it, but it makes you feel uncomfortable, uncertain. It's jarring when people leave in your job, and it's jarring when multiple leave in a month. You get 3 or 4 people that all left, and you're doing happy hours for all of them. It can make you feel nervous. So, in this case, you have to really dive into why are they leaving?
Right.
Why is everyone leaving? Are they leaving because a big competitor is offering signing bonuses and more money? Are they leaving because the job's just too hard, work-life balance? Is it they didn't get along with the old manager? What are the reasons they're leaving? Because I've worked in plenty of companies where you get hit with the turnover bug. And what I've found is that is almost always self-adjusting. A manager is calling the company's bluff on something, usually like, oh, the market hasn't moved that much, we don't need to pay that much. And then they lose 30% of their staff and they're like, oh man, like we're losing money with all these people leaving, maybe we should pay more. Or they think their staffing model works and it really doesn't, or the new software we installed really doesn't work that well and it's making everyone's life miserable. And what I've found is there is a turnover percentage number that will get anyone's attention all the way up to the CEO. If you lose enough people, someone's attention will get put onto it, where the number of people leaving called the executive's bluff. And then all of a sudden they become very open to, what can we do? How can we listen to you? They're going to come out in the field, they're going to listen more. So if you have a turnover problem and you can wait it out, and this is the last thing I'll say, Anna Frank, before we go into this, if you can wait out the turnover problem, the people who wait it out normally are the ones who get the spoils. They're normally the ones that get the new comp plan. They get the new salary ranges. They get the retention bonuses. They get the benefit of a new staffing model where you only have to do half the work as the people that were here 6 months ago.
That's
they
right.
get better managers in place. So just leaving because there's turnover, you're normally too late. It's kind of like timing the stock market. If you can stick it out until the peak of that turnover, you're probably going to get some benefits.
So Ian, I think it's really relevant right here. Talk a little bit about the spoils. Like, I've never seen this. So every company I've ever worked for where there was like people were leaving all around us, it's because it's NVR, it's 2006 to 2008. And like, there's an exodus because the market was going to hell, which we're going to talk about. So like, talk about like the fundamentals. It's a software program. Something you talked about a second ago, but like, why stick it? Like, I think it's really important to understand why to stick it out. Like, why?
Yeah. So, if you work for a good company that's about performance and you believe in the executives up top, usually a turnover bug, to me, it's a function of the people who are leaving are not being listened to. They have issues, whatever they might be, and they normally are listened to when enough of them leave. It's like anything, when there's the masses that happen. So it happened to us at MBR from 2015 to maybe 2014 to 16. We were talking about, we've got to change our comp plan. The way the comp plan is set up, our loan officers have to carry these 100 pipelines, and it pisses off the division because they're all busy. We need to pay more per closing. We kept bringing it up, but it would hurt margins. That's just the way it was. It was going to be a hit on margins, but long-term it was better. And finally, we just lost enough where enough home building divisions complained to the CEO, and it embarrassed everyone in the corporate office to where we went and changed the comp plan dramatically. And it changed changed how much people were paid. It changed their work-life balance. It changed a lot of things. But the loan officers that stuck around ended up getting the spoils of the people that had to grind before them and leave for retail jobs.
So let's unpack that a little bit. So it's during that stretch of time. This is going to go in two very divergent ways, but let's talk about it. So I work for NVR and I'm good. I'm not incredible, but I'm good. And the comp package changes. What am I making? I'm at middle. I'm at top 80%. So I'm not at the bottom, but I'm not your absolute superstar. Like, what am I making before the comp plan changes? What am I making after?
50%. Total comp. Let's just make
grand.
it simple. 50%, 100 to 150. Some went from 125 to 200.
Got it. And then let's just say I had jumped ship before that. And again, I'm not the woman we talk about all the time who went 8 extra salary, but I'm a normal performer. And I'm a normal performer. I leave what am I getting? I change jobs. I go through all the stress of that. I change jobs, and then not only do I change jobs, I get an increase. But what does it look like? Have I gone up
Went
50%?
to another builder where they were paying that already because we were lagging every other home builder. They had
Okay.
Dearborn and Lennar, the big ones, were already paying more than we were. So you
Okay.
go to someone that's paying that already, but what you've given up is all of these great relationships that you had with your sales
Momentum.
partners. You knew everyone in underwriting, and now you had to start all those over again. And you find that the culture isn't quite as cooperative. So now you're dealing with a whole different kind of, situation. Or you left to go into retail, and you're probably making good money today. You made more right away, but the difference being you're now having to hunt for every new deal, and you're really at the whims of interest rates more than anything. If interest rates go up, your volume goes way down. So you have an instability that you wouldn't have in working for that company.
So if it's monetary and monetary alone, quitting might make sense. But we just went through a minute ago from my unsourced doc. Boss, job fit, stunted growth, pay, and underappreciated. Pays fourth. So unless it's just about money, there's all these intangibles, and that
You gave
waiting.
up three really important things.
That's right.
For money that ended up coming to everyone anyway within the company.
And my guess is this, because I know the way NVR works, and we're kind of getting nuanced, but it makes sense. Let's just say your performers left and you stuck around. Your comp plan went up, but also they needed someone to service that backlog. So what happened is they probably gave you a bunch of that, and you ended up you probably jumped up even more than what Ian's talking about. Sustainably, you went up 50%, but you might have had a jump of an extra 20 or 30 grand because you had to get these things to close. So that's when loyalty is rewarded. And I think it's important to talk about. Those are the moments that you really want to look at it and say, I'm probably best served being here. This is a storm that will pass. This is not the foundation has been rocked to a point where this is no longer a stable building.
Yep. And I think so. Number 7 is your company is going through a transition. So we talked about you've got to make the decision of, is it short-term or is it a long-term transition that you're okay with? So everyone went through a transition this year with the pandemic of some kind. But it might be a reorganization. It might be an acquisition. It might be a change. Your CEO might be changed. An owner might retire and give the company over to his son. And it's a very different style of management. So, for me with a transition, it comes right back to, is this long-term? Is it short-term? Is there still enough benefit? Do I enjoy what I do enough that I can deal with? Transitions are never permanent. They always are. There's always that storming period, and then things settle into equilibrium. How long is it going to last?
That's it. And if you're in a place where the equilibrium doesn't come back, get out.
Get out. Number 8, and we put it down here on purpose because it's the obvious one. You're not paid well, at least in your mind. You're not paid your market. And I don't know, Frank, for me on this is on you. You need to negotiate better. To me, look, you might work for a stubborn company that just doesn't pay more and they can't pay more. So if you are already the highest paid person in the company doing what you do, and you are nowhere near what you would like to be making in life, and there are no other opportunities to make more money, it's worth going out and looking. It's worth going out and trying to find what you can. But if you're just unhappy that you're not paid well and someone made you an offer of 10, 15, 20% more, that's not going to change your life. So it's better to go negotiate with your manager on how to ask for more money. And we did an entire episode on this, on how to go ask your boss for a raise. Go watch that first and give your company a chance to pay you the market before you run and panic. Now, if they're nowhere near, then it's worth considering.
So what I'm putting in my notes here that I want to talk about is, are you in the right field? And this is kind of an easy example, but it's a good one, right? So my wife is a professor. She's way smarter than me. She's got 5 degrees or something ridiculous. And I mean, I barely got a college degree. So she is in a field where people are incredibly overeducated, but it doesn't pay. but nobody in her field really cares. Like they make good money. They make above the median, like significantly so, but it doesn't pay, very few of them make six figures.
The return isn't there on the investment of the education.
Exactly. But that was never a draw for me. Like, so I always went into where can I be compensated at the higher range? Now, I wasn't smart enough to get recruited by Wall Street, and I didn't really even know about Wall Street when I was a kid. Like, look, if I had a time machine, I could go back. I would have loved to have worked on Wall Street and on a floor and done that kind of stuff. Like, I think I would have enjoyed that. But let's take it back to something even simpler. When I was in college, I had a job. I had a job as a waiter, and people worked at the movie theater, people did like bookkeeping, people did all kinds of stuff. And like, I looked at this and I'm like, well, why would I want those jobs? Those job pays like $7-8 an hour. They're like, why do that? I want to be in a position where I can make into the 20s. Like as a waiter, a good waiter in the 90s, $20 an hour was a significant amount of money. So like if instead of working 3 times as much to make the same money, I wanted to have the ability to work 3 or 4 days and make what people could make in much more time. So it's a simple example from being a waiter in college, but this is what's important. You need to know what the range is in the business you're getting into. Like if you want to make 100 grand and that job pays 50, like best case, like you're going to have to be honest with yourself. Do I want the 50? Do I want this job or do I want the money? Because those things can never be reconciled completely. But if you're in the right place where you're aligned and what your salary demands are is in line with what is compensated for, if you're great, I mean, Ian, how many times have you wanted to get a raise? You can't just walk in your boss's office, close the door and say, I need a raise. Like that, you're not going to get the best money for that. But anytime I wanted to get a raise, I did. How about you?
100% every time.
And we did go into how do you do that and position yourself. But if you're not paid well, you have to look at it. Is it systemic? Am I in the wrong career? Am I in the wrong company? Or is it me? Because if it isn't you and those first 2 things are right, you can fix it.
When I left GE to go to NVR, you said something important there. Are you getting into a more profitable market? So I was in GE, I was selling in an industrial business, selling to a dying industry, steel mills, paper mills, power plants. It was shrinking in America. Like that's all going overseas. It still is. So selling to those, there were shrinking margins, declining. So even though I had this big job, I got this general manager of sales job, my salary was maybe 115,000 with a 25% bonus. And when I told them I'm leaving to go to NVR, they tried to like, what can we do to keep you? And it was like another 20,000 of salary. But I'm like, I'm getting paid 165 with 165 bonus. I'm getting triple what you're offering me in a growing company where the stock options they're giving me are going to be worth millions. And our stock is declining every year. My stock options, I've been here 6 years. I've got them every year. They're worth 0. So I didn't even want to make it about money because they couldn't even come close. And what I just did was I traded up to a much better, more profitable industry. I traded industries to be more profitable.
Yes. So what I think you have to look at is everything Ian said is right. And one of the things that I always compliment him on that he did really well is he took skill sets from GE and he learned how to learn different businesses. He learned a couple of different skills across a multitude of platforms, but those skills were understanding the business, understanding the client, understanding how to do sales, understanding how to manage a team in 4 or 5 different business units before the age of 28, which is not an insignificant thing. And then what he did is he stepped back and looked at it and said, okay, I've done this at GE and from light bulbs to a combine, like all different things. Let me just pick a different thing. And then let me find something that values my skill set that I know I've already done it 5 times at GE. Why can't I do it at NVR? And instead of it being, turbines, it's mortgages.
And it's the same thing. I'm managing people. I'm trying to figure out how to get a better process, more sales. I'm just getting paid triple.
But they can't outsource that like they can at GE. There's not as many engineers without, like Ian competed against a bunch of engineers with very little personality. So he was dominating there, but at the same time, they could find an engineer with very little personality to do what he was doing. But he then took that dynamic skill set and he moved. So what I want to say here, and I think this is really important here, if you're going to do this, do it. Like, don't half-ass it. Like, if you are going to leave for money, double, triple, quadruple. If you're leaving for 8% more or 12% more, I don't think it's worth it.
Do the math after taxes. I mean,
it's so small.
All it's going to get you is a better car payment. That's it.
But if you can just pivot, take those skill sets and take it to somewhere where it values it more, then it makes a ton of sense.
That's how you build wealth.
That's it.
You go to a company that gives you a chance to practice, teaches you skills, you're surrounded by really talented people. You learn through osmosis. Then once you have 5 or 6 years of that, you go lever it in another company that desperately could use those skills, because your company probably already has plenty of it as it is.
That's right. And then the other thing you want to do is you don't want to quit that job until you found the other one. So could you do 65% of what you were doing before and not end up on a performance plan and spend 35% of your time looking for that right opportunity? And let me tell you what that right opportunity just looks like in a very simple thing. When I went to NVR and I started as a project manager, they hired like business majors and English majors to build houses. And I had a degree in construction. I stood out. Where does your unique skill set allow you to stand out? That is where you ring the bell on money.
100%. So look, I want to get to our final 3 questions. So just for everyone else, our number 9 and our number 10, I've already touched on. Your company is shrinking, number 9, and 10, your industry has been disrupted.
We've covered that through here.
For me, both of those clicked for GE. So my industry was shrinking, my company was shrinking, and it had been disrupted by China and offshoring. So it was going to continue. That trend would continue, whereas those trends could not happen in home building, which is why I wanted to go there. Is you could not just bring in houses off the boats from China. The internet could not take it away. It was a local business. I knew it was very different than what I was doing.
Correct.
So 3 questions that we think you should ask yourself before leaving. Number 1, would I recruit a friend into this company right now? And the reason why I think that is a very powerful question to ask yourself is, if your company is really up against it, but you believe in it, you believe in the executives, you believe in the people, you believe that all it needs is a few more good people like yourself, and we're right back on this thing. If you would do that, if you would put your name on your company and say, join us, it's going to be great. We're just in a bad place right now and we need your help, then you shouldn't be thinking of leaving. But if you're like, there is no way in hell I would put my name on that or bring someone into this toxic place, to this miserable joint, then that's probably something that tells you, why would you stay if you wouldn't recommend it to a friend?
The second question is, are the people who left, decidedly or definitively happier? It's pretty easy to look at that, right? So did they leave? Are they happier? How are they doing? Don't be blind to that. If you're in a job where people have gone out and they're like, it was better there than I really gave it credit for, you probably have something you should fix. If they're like, no, man, like it's better here. It's like, you don't have any clue what's out there.
And don't call people that left a month ago. Like let them settle into
6 months in. Like, let's see where it is.
Give them the work.
And Ian and I have talked about this before too. Like, people at NVR are so deep in NVR. Like, they literally with a straight face say, well, we have as good of a training department. Like nobody knows that NVR's training department, how good it is. Like they're just so blinded by what they're doing. They can't give you an open perspective of it.
They've never seen another training department, so they have no comparison.
Right, exactly. So that is something that if you do see that starting to happen out there, it's like, oh, I should open my eyes a little bit.
Yeah, and one thing you just said, that's why it's healthy for companies sometimes to hire people from the outside, because it's pretty funny. I heard a lot of that when I started MVR, and I was coming from GE. So I'd be like, I went to a few training classes. I'm like, really? You guys have you believe you have a world-class training department here? Like, you outsource everything to various companies that aren't even all the same company. Regardless, number 3, how hard would it be to find the same job in the future? I ask that of anyone who calls me. I say, look, let's say you go take this chance. You want to go start a restaurant. You want to go make soap out of your house and start a company. Awesome. If you go do that, let me ask you a question. The job you have right now, would your company take you back at pretty much the same amount of money? Because I know you're damn good at it. Or would you be able to find that same job almost with any competitor at any time? And if the answer is, yeah, this job will always be available and always at the same price. If that's the answer, that it's not a terribly hard job to go find again, you don't have much risk in trying something else. You'll be back employed like that. And there are certain jobs just like that.
Yeah. I had people ask me that question before at points in my life, and I wasn't able to answer it. And the reason I wasn't able to answer it is I wasn't self-confident enough, or I didn't think my skills transferred, or I wasn't being honest. The other thing I was thinking about is, well, if I start a business and I flame out, like, I don't really want to become a sales guy again, because like you build all these stories up in your head. What we want you to do is we want you to look at it and just look at it with blinders and say this: is this a job? Be honest. Is this a job that I can find? I'm making 100 grand. I'm making 150 grand, whatever the number is. Could I replace that? Okay. Doing something else. Yeah. Then something else might make me happier. I should try it. And if I can't, I don't necessarily have to come back here, but I could find this again.
I think so. So I think ask those 3 questions to yourself. And again, we gave you 10 reasons. If 5 or 6 of those are you, it's time to go. If 1 is you, if 1 or 2 are you, but the other 8, you can't answer yes, you probably have it better than you're leading on. You're just in a tough place. If you've got more of these than not, it's time to get out of there. It's like everything, it's layers that get into some of these things.
I think it's at a minimum, probably 3. But if you're somewhere under 5, you might be able to solve some of it. Like in every job, there's some components of these at any given time. But if it's somewhere between 3 and 6, like, get out. And if it's like somewhere between 6 and 10, like, I'll tell a funny story to wrap this up. So one of my best friends, Ian knows him. He worked at Arthur Andersen, and Arthur Andersen was coming through like everything at the end of the Enron crisis. And my friend we were like 2-3 years out of college at this time. So he was young in this position, and like everything on this list, his boss sucked, the culture sucked, everybody was leaving, there was an industry disruptor, like everything. And one day someone used the voice of Chewbacca to call every voicemail in the entire company and say something about getting out. Like, literally, like, people started picking up their voicemails. Like, this was an era before that no ring, right to voicemail, and everyone's listening to it just laughing in an office because Chewbacca was like, get out.
Yes. And for Frank and I, out of these 10, probably the only one that fits is you aren't paid well, because that is an absolute fact with a podcast. But I think all the rest of them, we would not be able to say yes to. So we're going to keep doing a few more episodes, at least for now. Maybe your company doesn't treat people well. Maybe I could say that the way you've treated me with my flannel today, it's a little bit hurtful. You should think about it.
And although he might complain, Ian does love me as his boss. So
co-boss, FYI. All right. Good to see you, Frankie.
Always a pleasure, Ian.
See you, man.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.